Hey everybody, Coach Joby here, and I want to just share a few things, a few reminders I want to pass along that I think everybody knows, but I think it's important and worth repeating because it became very apparent to me when I was racing Oceanside that these things are important, and I wanted to pass them along as reminders. And so first is pacing. Pacing, when you're pacing your race, when you're pushing your watts, your run pace, your power on the bike, it's always better to go a little bit conservative at the beginning and then push more towards the end. Now, I'm not saying you intentionally should not push watts, not push power, not push the pace at the beginning and then crush it at the end. We don't want to have such an extreme, but ideally we want to finish strong. And so that means holding back a little bit and what feels comfortable for the first hour of your race is going to feel different in the third hour of your race. And so just a reminder, be aware of that. The more you race, the more experience you have, the more that becomes ingrained in you. And especially if you made any mistakes in pacing, that becomes even more apparent, and you'll remember that. And it's just wanted to remind you of that. So pacing is important. The next thing is fueling. Fueling is absolutely essential for a good race performance. So yeah, at Oceanside, I lost my nutrition. I lost my back bottle. My whole cage came off, and that was about 700 calories of carbohydrates with about 1,500 milligrams of sodium. So that's a huge hit for me. And I personally take in about 380 to about 400 calories per hour the first 2 hours of the bike, and then I scale back a little bit for the final portion of the bike ride. So not having those calories available to me meant that I needed, for the first time, to rely on course nutrition. I usually take water to add to my my concentrate in my aero bottle, but now I had to be even more dependent. And the curveball was I've never used the gels that are on the course, and at that point I really didn't have a choice. And so I knew that, okay, I could either fuel at my same rate and take in as much fuel as I can with course nutrition, which after the first aid station, I realized it was going to be a bit of a challenge to get in as much as I normally do. And then I thought, you know what, because I'm basically, after the first hour, I'm trying completely new nutrition the rest of the ride, I wanted to be a little bit more cautious with my intake. So I dialed back my calorie intake a little bit more for the last hour and a half of the bike ride because it was new to me. So the reason I bring that up is because I knew that I couldn't just wing it and just kind of go through and just take what I wanted to. I knew I had to have a specific caloric target. So I know for a fact that I took in 300 calories per hour the last hour and a half of that ride. The first hour I took in 400 calories, which I had that nutrition with me, but after that it dropped to 300. That was intentional, but it took a lot of focused effort to make that happen, because without my nutrition on my bottle, it became a challenge to get that in. But I knew, and I want to remind you, that's important if you want to run well off of a bike. Absolutely essential. Going back to the next reminder, is sodium. So the one area that I was lacking, that I know for a fact wasn't there, was my sodium intake. I usually get in about 1,000 milligrams of sodium per hour. I wasn't able to get close to that. And the reason I bring this up is because I felt that in terms of my a little bit of tightness and cramping, muscle twitching that happened to me towards the end of the bike, and then also the first 3 miles of the run, I felt it pretty significantly. So sodium intake is important. And by the way, if you haven't done a sodium estimate test, you should estimate what your needs are. Precision Hydration has a really good online sweat test estimator. By answering some questions, it'll give you a pretty good guide. I've used that. I've had my sodium concentration tested, and then most recently I used Levelin to get my sodium concentration tested. And that test, along with the Precision Hydration test, gave me similar numbers. So anyway, the point is, know what your sodium intake is, know what you need for race day, and stick to that. You can't escape the fact that you need fuel and you need sodium, especially if you lose a lot. And it's really important. And then next reminder is listen to your body. So we all have targets that we need to hit, or we should hit, and we want to hit. But race day is race day, right? And if you are stuck to those targets to a fault, where you stick to those and it derails your race, that it's a mistake that is avoidable. you have to listen to the signs that your body is giving you. If a pace feels overly aggressive, like a power, for example, let's say you have a target power and that just feels like it's a push early on in the race, well, you have to adjust and dial it back, and then maybe come back to that power target a little bit later on in the race when maybe it feels better later on in the race. Maybe it doesn't, and maybe you just stick to a lower power. Or maybe the opposite. Maybe you're feeling amazing, and after some cautious beginnings of your race, you then push more power because you feel amazing, and that's a possibility too. So you have to listen to what your body is feeling, right? You have to listen to what your body is telling you, and if that means slowing down, if that means speeding up, then do that. And racing is dynamic, and the ability to respond to what your body is saying is a marker of somebody who's a wise, let's call it a wise racer, where you just use your experience of racing. And some of you are new to racing, and so you don't have that, and that's where the more experience that comes into play, you're gonna develop and hone in on that skill. That's gonna allow you to execute a great race in basically any race setting that you approach. So listen to your body. That's absolutely essential, and keep that in mind. And then finally, especially for a half Ironman, transition times matter. So if your goal is just to cross the finish line and just get across the finish line and that's it, and you have no time goals, then transitions don't matter. But if your goal is to hit a certain time, transition times do make a significant impact. Look at it this way. Let's just say your transition time, you take, let's say, 2 extra minutes than you should in a race. And specifically let's call it T2, from the bike to the run, and you take 2 extra minutes than you should. You add on 2 extra minutes. Well, if you look at how that impacts your running, think about how long it would take you to catch somebody who started 2 minutes ahead of you. Think about the effort and the intensity you'd have to push before you caught that person. And depending on their pace, obviously that would impact it, but it would require somebody running at your equivalent pace. It would require, I mean, you might not even catch them. It may be 10 miles left, or 10 miles of the race before you caught them. So think about that. Look at it not so much as the time taking you in transition, but thinking about the time that you would have to make up on the run to get that time back. I'm not saying like go through without regard for anything, but don't lollygag in transition, because if you're taking more time than you should, that's time that is penalizing you coming out on the run. So look at it as that. And those are just some reminders that I wanted to pass along to you. Race day is race day. It's dynamic. You have to adjust. You have to respond. But when you're looking to get the most out of your performance, these are things that you have to consider and you should consider. And it's something that's worth practicing, especially the fueling, because that's really important. All right. Hope you have a great week, and I'll chat with you soon.